The Japanese anime Infinite Dendrogram starts with the main character, Reiji Mukudori, getting a virtual reality game called Infinite Dendrogram. Inside the game, he meets an AI named Cheshire who asks him to pick an online alias. So he chooses Ray Starling. In the game world, he meets an NPC named Liliana Grandria, who needs help finding her sister, Milane. Reiji's brother Shu joins in to help. They find Milane in an old fruit garden, but then they're attacked by Demi-Drag worms. As Shu gets pulled below the ground and Liliana battles somewhere else, Ray is the only one left to rescue Milane. Luckily, Ray awakens his embryo, Nemesis, who turns into a sword and defeats the final Demi-Dragon worm, completing the mission. Afterward, Ray and Nemesis attempt to level up, but they get ambushed by a player killer. Even though Ray tries his best to run away, he gets killed and needs to wait a whole day before he can play Infinite Dendrogram again. The next day, Ray and Nemesis meet Rook and his embryo, Babylon. They learn that the player killer bands stalking the four corners of Alter have been eliminated. Mary Adler, a reporter from the Dendrogram Information Network, confirms the news and shows them a video of 3 top players in Alter defeating them. Later, Ray and his friends agree to a mission to escort goods to Gideon, and Mary decides to join them. On the journey, they come across a bunch of goblins attacking a group of travelers. Ray and his companions manage to defeat the goblins, but then they suddenly ambushed by an ogre named Gardranda. This ogre releases poisonous gas to weaken Ray and the group. Ray manages to defeat the ogre, but he injures himself in the process. Just then, a stranger dressed as a penguin, who calls himself Dr. Flamingo, appears and gives Ray a healing potion. The potion does heal Ray, but it also gives him animal ears. Flamingo quickly leaves, telling Ray that he'll go back to normal in 10 hours. The following day, Ray and Nemesis go to an item shop in Gideon, where they meet another player named Hugo and his friend, Kaiko. They all receive a mission from a woman who asks for their help in rescuing her brother from a gang that kidnaps children. After agreeing to the mission, Hugo explains to Ray that masters with maiden-time embryos like Ray see Infinite Dendrogram not just as a game, but as a world as real as their own. He then reveals his weapon, a massive robot, Mangingir, which he uses to transport Ray to the gang's stronghold. With combined efforts, they successfully defeat the child kidnappers and rescue the boy. Later on, Hugo and Cocytus meet with Flamingo, who removes his penguin suit and discusses his strategy to put an end to the conflict between Alter and Drive, the land of machines. Mary invites Ray and Rook to a combat tournament happening in Gideon. Shu lets Ray and Nemesis know that he's acquainted with Figaro, a strong player participating in the competition. When the tournament begins, Shu hands Ray a telepathy cuff, a device for long-distance communication between two people. Shu also cautions Figaro that he'll be up against some tough rivals in the tournament, but Figaro is determined to come out victorious. The match starts between Figaro and Zunyu, who is the bodyguard of an ambassador from the Huanghe Empire. Zunyu manages to land multiple hits on Figaro, even taking out one of his lungs. However, as Shu explains, Figaro has a unique embryo that boosts his strength the longer he fights. Just when it seemed like Zunyu is about to strike a deadly blow at Figaro's heart, Shu reveals that Figaro's embryo takes the form of a heart inside his body, shielding him from the attack. Figaro emerges as the victor of the match, but the moment is interrupted by Flamingo, who discloses his true identity as Franklin, a scientist employed by the Drive Imperium. He claims that he has captured Elizabeth, Alter's second princess, and is holding her captive. Mary is aware that Elizabeth was kidnapped just before the Gideon tournament began, and tries to rescue her from Franklin's clutches. Franklin reveals that he has surrounded the arena with a barrier, and if players attempt to breach it, the creatures under his control will lay waste to Gideon. While Mary goes on to save Elizabeth on her own, Bray discovers that under-level players, like himself, can walk through the barrier safely, as the barrier was only meant to hold high-ranking players that were taking part in the tournament's matches. Ray, Rook, and other under-level players fight players affiliated with Drive. Franklin explains his plan to Elizabeth, aiming to get rid of altar-associated players to weaken the city for an upcoming war against Drive. In a brief moment, Mary rescues Elizabeth and seriously injures Franklin. However, Franklin transfers his injuries to his monsters, saving himself. After recapturing Elizabeth, Franklin realizes that Mary managed to defeat a high-ranking player. Using a lower-level embryo, he commands his henchman, Velder Bell, to eliminate Mary. On the other hand, a team of less experienced players tries to free Gideon's West Gate, but Hugo intervenes and defeats them. Velder Bell tries to use his ability to manipulate sound to kill Mary, but she unleashes her powerful embryo, Arc and Seal, and defeats him. Meanwhile, Franklin carries the unconscious Elizabeth outside Gideon and tasks Hugo with preventing anyone except Ray from leaving the city. As Franklin steps outside the city, he is confronted by the Royal Guard under Liliana's command. In response, he summons a creature and orders to kill the guard. Ray and Rook eventually catch up with Hugo. After an exchange of attacks between Ray and Hugo, Hugo agrees to let Ray face Franklin. As Rook remains behind to battle Hugo, Ray reaches the outskirts of the city, ready to engage Franklin. While Rook and Hugo's duel rages on, Hugo employs a skill that gradually freezes parts of Rook's body. Using his deduction abilities, Rook comprehends the mechanics of Hugo's skill and merges with Babylon to counter Hugo's Magengear on even terms. This surge in power enables Hook to penetrate Hugo's cockpit and immobilize him using his charm magic. Meanwhile, Franklin tells Ray that the potion he gave him earlier actually told Franklin information about his status, level, and weapons, and he used the information to create a monster with the express purpose of killing Ray. He also reveals he is the one that sent Liliana's sister, Milliane, to the monster-infested orchard, which was yet another attempt to weaken Alter. Ray tells Liliana and Sir Lindos of the Royal Guard to save their injured companions, while he attacks the monster directly. Ray is able to expose the monster's entrails and unleash a magical attack that completely disintegrates it. Although Ray is successful in destroying Franklin's monster, he gets severely injured and falls unconscious. Liliana casts a healing spell that keeps Ray from dying, but she is unable to heal his left arm. Franklin reveals the monster Ray destroyed was the weakest monster he created for the invasion, and he uses a detonator to activate a series of bombs he planted all over Alter. But the bombs fail to activate because Mary has disarmed them. Rook captures Hugo and makes him realize that Franklin never intended to end the Alter Drive war with minimal casualties. Franklin summoned his embryo, Pandemonium, and sends an army of suicidal monsters to attack Gideon. But Ray awakens and takes on Franklin's monster to buy enough time for his allies to prepare a counterattack. With the help of Rook, Mary, and a group of players, Ray is able to hold the line. Franklin realizes that with so many players assisting Ray, Hugo must have betrayed him. Shu enters the battlefield and reveals himself to be the King of Destruction, the player with the highest kill count in all of Alter. He summons his embryo, a battleship that decimates a significant portion of Franklin's army. Franklin realizes he has lost the battle, so he activates his final weapon, a large subterranean creature that tries to destroy Gideon's Coliseum. But Fathom, a foreign player who has infiltrated the Coliseum, uses magic to move the tectonic plates around the creature, crushing it to death. Ray manages to reach Pandemonium and attempts to confront Franklin, but Hugo steps in to protect Franklin, revealing that Franklin is Hugo's elder sister, Francesca. Ray sacrifices both arms to defeat both Hugo and Franklin, while Shu destroys Pandemonium and Mary rescues Elizabeth. With the battle over, Liliana heals Ray, but is unable to save his left arm. This leaves Ray with his right arm to continue playing the game. In the aftermath, Franklin removes Hugo from his clan, the Triangle of Wisdom, in an attempt to protect him and to undo any moral restraints he may have in his goal of beating Ray. Ray discovers Mary was the one who killed him, and he has a rematch with her. This brings the recap to a close. What are your thoughts about this series? Comment down below. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.